Oliver Tomajko and Pete Ingram for round number 4.
Oliver's been killing it this year. If I'm not mistaken, he's already qualified for the Players' Championship after a Season 1 stint, right?
Yep, had a great Season 1. We'll be seeing him in Roanoke later this year. Peter Ingram, currently in 8th on the Season 2 leaderboard. He's looking to move up a couple slots and try to clinch his own spot.
Yeah, we kind of have dual leaderboards at the moment because we have the overall. That's where you're seeing Pete Ingram at 26 and Oliver at number 3. But in the Season 2 leaderboard, we're also going to be end up giving invites to the Players' Championship based on how you do in the back half of this year, as well as those at-large bids. So we're kind of focusing on the yearly leaderboard just to showcase the players who have been at it all year, performing well all year.
Absolutely.
And these two players definitely are doing that.
See some London mulliganing happening.
Not a fan. Not a fan.
Well, this is a fair mirror anyway, so shouldn't be too unreasonable. You see Tomajko starting here off that mulligan, shocking for Overgrown Tomb to 18, and there's Inquisition of Kozilek. We'll get a look at Ingram's hand.
Discard's actually pretty good in general against Stoneforge Mystic, just because a lot of times you just wait for them to cast Stoneforge Mystic and you strip the equipment from them. In Legacy, Thoughtseize was almost always cast after Stoneforge Mystic, and there would always be this weird dance on when to cast Stoneforge, when to cast Thoughtseize, and when you should brainstorm in response to protect yourself from these discard effects. So you don't have quite as much of that in Modern. And on turn 1, if Oliver doesn't have another play, obviously Inquisition's a very easy cast here, and it looks like he's just going to go ahead and strip Peter of that potential turn 2 play.
Yeah, so for his Mystic gone, rest of the hand was Cryptic Command, 2 Path to Exiles, Field of Ruin, Hallowed Fountain, and Flooded Strand. Hallowed Fountain tapped will be turn 1 for Ingram. We'll see if Tomajko can get some threats on the table.
Looks like Oliver has a pretty juicy hand, but unfortunately for him, his red source is a Raging Ravine, so it's going to enter the battlefield tap, so couldn't get something like Ren 6 on the battlefield this turn. Now, there's a good chance that Pete uses a Path to Exile here if Oliver goes for something like Tarmogoyf. I would have liked to have seen him maybe do that just to get some extra resources to work with, because it also turns on the Raging Ravine as the game goes along. That's kind of why you have so many Raging Ravines in these Jund decks.
Sure. Just see some lands, though. It was that Raging Ravine for Tomajko. Flooded Strand was land for Ingram. Now we see an Inquisition for Tomajko. He knows about a Cryptic Command and 2 Path to Exiles. Can't take the command with this one.
Yeah, he's looking to protect this Ren 6. Wanted to make sure there was no Logic Knot or some counterspell there hiding in the wings. Looks like he is going to be able to snatch up a Snapcaster Mage. One of the better hits here for that discard effect. Yeah. And then a Ren 6 as a follow-up, more than likely.
Takes the Snapcaster, sees the other card picked up was a basic island, and now you see Ren 6 deployed.
Not at his best, though. Oliver doesn't have a fetch land early on, so no way to utilize the plus, but it is a Planeswalker that eventually threatens ultimate.
So Ren 6 up to 4, no land return. Ingram fetches to 19. And just a Cryptic Command and a couple Path to Exiles to go with his lands.
That's one of the reasons why Oliver didn't cast a removal spell, or sorry, a creature spell on the second turn. Wanted to get the Ren 6 online as quickly as possible, but also just knew that whatever creature he played was going to get immediately killed.
Island will be played for Ingram. He'll pass back. The Field of Ruin not looking great against Ren 6.
No, it is not.
Tarmogoyf deployed for Tomajko. We got Sorcery, Creature, Land. That's a 3/4. Though likely we'll be getting hit by Path to Exile before long.
Yeah, the path is fine here for Oliver too, just because he gets that extra mana to be able to cast stuff like Bloodbraid Elf or potentially activating the Raging Ravine. But Pete is really incentivized to go ahead and clear now so that when he plays his 4th land in the Field of Ruin, it gives him Cryptic Command mana.
No 4th land for Tomajko. The Ren 6 goes to 5. Path to Exile is going to turn that Tarmogoyf into a swamp. We'll go back to Ingram.
Now, Ren 6 is a lot less pressuring when there's no land to be getting back out of the graveyard. A really unfortunate series of events for Oliver in the early turns here.
You'd like to see a fetch land or a horizon land. Those would be great. Ingram's going to play that Field of Ruin that turns on Cryptic Command mana. We'll see what Tomajko can do. He can keep plussing the Renin 6. That's going to force action on the Cryptic Command inevitably. But you want to get some more stuff going. And here's a Bloodbraid Elf. That's not a bad one. The Cascade is Tarmogoyf as well.
It's a pretty good hit. Now, if I'm Pete, you got a couple of options here. I don't mind a counter bounce the Renin 6. You don't have a whole lot of ways to get Renin 6 off the battlefield, and that'll at least slow down the ultimate for a few turns. And you can afford to take a hit from the Bloodbraid Elf and just deal with it on a future turn with your Path to Exile.
And that was the play. Counter the Tarmogoyf, bounce the Renin 6. Bloodbraid Elf does come across. Ingram to 16. Tapping a 2. He picked up another Stoneforge Mystic. This one's going to be good.
Goes and gets a Manriki Gusari. The Mirror Breaker.
Gonna be Batterskull.
That's a nice one. 2 mana, 1/2 that fetches up a Baneslayer Angel even if it dies. As long as Pete has a follow-up land on the next turn or two. But he also just has a removal self right now for the Bloodbraid Elf. And the Batterskull Germ token just represents a lot of pressure on Tomajko over the course of the game if he doesn't find a way to destroy the artifact proper.
There's no 5th land played for Ingram. We'll go back to Tomajko. Starts his turn by attacking with Bloodbraid Elf. That connects. Ingram to 13. Tomajko thinking about redeploying that Renin 6.
Yeah, that's going to tap his red mana here. That's going to let Ingram actually... well, it's going to let him Spell Snare, which is nice, but... Okay, Abrupt Decay was the last card that I was unsure of from Tomajko. I thought it might have been an Assassin's Trophy, which would have gave Pete that extra land.
All right, so Abrupt Decay takes care of the Mystic. Spell Snare takes care of the Renin 6. Ingram drew a land for turn. Could deploy Batterskull here.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to just see him slam it. Get that 4/4 lifelinking Germ on the battlefield. Even if Tomajko has an answer, he's still just going to go to 10 from the attack because he can't kill the Germ and attack with the Raging Ravine. So his life total is relatively protected at the moment. What he doesn't know is that Tomajko does have 2 copies of Lightning Bolt in hand, so he is kind of sitting 6 points lower than what he is on the table.
Ingram will play Island as land number 5 and passes. You do have to be concerned about the Batterskull being destroyed if you don't have 3 to leave up. We know about a Path to Exile in Ingram's hands, so he has some play without it.
I mean, that's fair. I just think that, you know, you need 3 more lands to be able to cast the Batterskull and protect it. Just doesn't seem feasible with how the game's really progressing. But, you know, I'm fine being wrong here.
Tomajko will play land number 5, shocking for Stomping Ground to 16.
He's going to force an activation of the Field Rune and the Path to Exile in the sequence. Ingram's going to use both. I would bet a lot of money on it.
So Ravine fired up. It's hit by Field of Rune. Bloodbraid Elf hit by Path to Exile. Ingram's going to find 1 basic. Tomajko could find 2. Here's basic Mountain off of the field.
He does have the 1 more, yeah.
Forest tapped off the path.
2 copies of Forest in Oliver's Jund deck. Normally we see it the other way around. It's usually 2 copies of Swamp because of the double black from Liliana of the Veil, but...
the basic Mountain, also a rarity.
Yeah, well, not these days. It has been in the past. Normally it was 2 Swamp, 1 Forest. But the more basics, the better in the current metagame, I think, with Path to Exile running rampant, Field of Ruin in a lot of places.
Ingram passed on casting Batterskull once again, going to elect to cast Vendilion Click into Tomajko's draw step. Sees 2 Lightning Bolts and a Verdant Catacombs. Tomajko can keep those.
You think he's going to cast the next turn?
Seems likely from here. There's the Batterskull.
Hold on, who's got the magic 8 ball? Signs point to yes. All right, Cole gets command off the top for Tomajko. Nope.
Well, Tarmogoyf.
It's large.
It's larger than the last one we saw. Instant creature, land, sorcery, planeswalker. We got a 5/6.
Okay, that actually checks the Batterskull Germ pretty well here. It is larger and more in charger.
Does not race, but it does check, like you said.
Right, yeah, he can never really attack with the Tarmogoyf in this stalemate process because he does lose that race eventually. 4 attacks from that, you know,
Here's an opt for Ingram. Sunk in his chair immediately when he saw this top card.
It must have been something like okay, but doesn't really get him out of the situation. Or it might have even just been like another opt or something, and he just like might end up needing all the mana.
Whatever it was, it went to the bottom, and now Jace the Mind Sculpture in Ingram's hand.
Honestly, I kind of like the tempo play. I kind of like playing Jace, bounce the Tarmogoyf, attack for 4. That really buffers your life total, protects you a bit. Oliver has to use his Lightning Bolt to kill the Jace. But he decides to save it. You know, once he clears the Tarmogoyf, that Jace is going to run away with the game as long as Oliver doesn't peel like another Bloodbraid Elf or something to immediately check it. So Pete's just playing it pretty slow here. And, you know, that's a fine place to be at.
Just saw him pass there. Tomajko draws and does the same. Draw step for Tomajko was a land. Got to figure he's really missing Faithless Looting right about now. And here is that Jace the Mind Sculptor for Ingram. See if he gets aggressive and bounces the Tarmogoyf. No, he's going to plus.
Oh, man.
Fate Seal Tomajko.
I thought he had a Spell Snare in hand, too. I actually really wanted to see him bounce Goyf and get aggressive.
So that card was kept on top. Tomajko draws another land. Tarmogoyf attacks Jace. Germ Token jumps in front. Ingram to 17.
Well, now what he can do, which is really sweet, is he can actually bounce Tarmogoyf. That keeps Jace 4 loyalty out of Lightning Bolt range, and then Spell Snare, plus bounce the Batterskull back to his hand to recast it. So he's got it basically locked up at this point, unless Oliver has just an incredible string of draws.
So you see the bounce with the Jace, Celestial Colonnade tapped, and Tomajko picks up another land, though it is a Nurturing Peat land. He gets a redraw. And it's a Blackleaf Cliffs. And Tomajko has seen enough. This Jund deck ain't dredge. Pete Ingram up a game over Tomajko.
Yeah, that was impressive stuff from Pete. You know, he had most of the answers at the right times. Never really felt like he was super far behind. What is this, a sideboard for ants?
Gonna sideboard in a whole other deck. I think that's the main deck that we're seeing over there.
No, it's just the same sideboard like 3 times, I think.
Oh, okay.
I see Alpine Moon, Collective Brutality. You know,
yeah, that
if
would
you
be a bad main deck.
Just get your Nancy Drew Spike Kit out, get your magnifying glass, and just put it right up to your monitor.
Be sure to... Okay, we'll start with
Let's just
Ingram.
talk about Pete for a second.
Yeah, all right. Now, okay, here we go. Oliver Tomajko, the sideboard. On the Jund side of things, we have 3 Collective Brutality, 2 Alpine Moon, 2 Collector Roofs, 2 Fulminator Mage, 2 Plague Engineer, 2 Huntmaster of the Fells, a Nihil Spellbomb, and an Ancient Grudge.
All right, so if you're Oliver, you got to kind of settle in for the late game. You got to bring in some cards that kind of function as the game goes late while also doing something in the early turns, like maybe applying some pressure, just forcing a 2-for-1, or making sure that Pete has a counterspell at every given opportunity. I think that means you want, first of all, you want Ancient Grudge. That takes care of a lot of the equipment before it actually gets out of hand. And a single Ancient Grudge can brick off multiple Stoneforge Mystics, which I like. Now Spellbomb is kind of this value card that shuts down Snapcaster Mage. I don't love it, but I think it's probably going to end up coming in for some of those, some of the stuff that is a little mediocre in Oliver's deck. 2 Huntmaster of the Fells, I think, come in just because they require a sweeper effect or 2 removal spells. And if the Huntmaster ever kind of gets left unfettered for a while, it can take over the game. It's a really powerful card. I like Fulminator Mages. I think that they're great at keeping Celestial Colonnade in check. But, you know, for the most part, you're just going to cast them as a 3-mana 2/2 and then kind of wait for your opponent to do something. If they activate Colonnade to start attacking you or your Planeswalker, you blow it up. If they don't, then, hey, you got a 2/2 that basically never dies, and you just keep attacking. I don't really like any of the other cards out of the sideboard. Collective Brutality can be a discard spell, but that also takes care of Stoneforge Mystic. And I think it'll probably come in here, but I don't love it.
All right, the sideboard for Ingram, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Ceremonious Rejection, 2 Timely Reinforcements, 2 Celestial Purge, 2 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, a Disdainful Stroke, another Batterskull, another Vendilion Click, a Disenchant, and a Supreme Verdict.
All right, go one by one. Supreme Verdict comes in. It's a great way to clean up Bloodbraid Elf and the creature it finds. It's not too good against all the Planeswalkers. Wrenn and 6 kind of throws a wrench into the game plan here. I like the extra Batterskull as insulation against a disenchant effect. The Vendilion Click is a kind of a flashy way to steal a Bloodbraid Elf from your opponent before it comes down, while also letting you pressure some Planeswalkers. But it does have 1 toughness, so Wrenn and 6 can be a little annoying. The Getting Out Alive Zendikar gives you a bit of play as the game goes long, makes it so that spot removal from Oliver is not always going to get the job done. And if he doesn't actually apply pressure on the battlefield, Gideon just kind of runs away with the game. Celestial Purge is a great answer to both Wrenn and 6 and Liliana the Veil. Time reinforcements can buy you a lot of time. Wouldn't hate to see those. And if I'm Peter, I'm just trying to get a lot of the counterspells out of my deck. I think the 2-mana counterspells like Mana Leak or whatever are generally pretty bad because your opponent can usually just invalidate it in some way or another with a discard spell. Yeah, that's basically all I got.
Players in the feature match area this weekend sitting in ordinary chairs for ordinary people. However, you at home could be lounging in style in a Karnox chair. Gets 10% off at checkout when you visit karnox.com/SCG. We usually have these chairs on the road, though the truck's kind of been around the whole country the last month, so we do not have them, unfortunately, this weekend.
I'm mad about it.
Same.
I'm actually mad. I actually applied for a sponsorship from them, too. Didn't hear back.
Yikes.
I'm mad about it.
Players underway for game number 2. Tomajko leading on a
I got to apply some pressure to him, okay?
Do you?
Okay, maybe not.
Take a look at Ingram's hand. Field of Ruin, Island, Celestial Colonnade, second Field of Ruin, Spell Snare, Snapcaster Mage, and Vendilion Click.
All right, this hand is a bit hard to piece together exactly what you should be taking. Snapcaster is almost always the easy pick because it kind of doubles as your best card, but Vendilion Click kind of represents a weird threat, and Oliver here does decide to take the Vendilion Click, which, you know, could mean a lot of things about his hand. Maybe specifically that he doesn't have a lot of removal.
Could also mean that he either has a lot of 2-mana spells or doesn't have any, leaving that Spell Snare in hand. You see another Thoughtseize on turn number 2, facing down that Island from Ingram, and you see Dismember picked up. Let's put Tomajko down to 16, and now he'll take the Snapcaster Mage. So just a removal spell and a situational counter spell. Raging Ravine is the second land for Tomajko. Colonnade for Ingram.
Spell Snare is usually pretty good against the Jund decks, though. They have high potency of powerful 2-drops. Adding Wrenn and 6 to the mix only makes Spell Snare that much more important. But here Oliver knows about it, so he can kind of play around it as much as one could play around a 2-mana or 1-mana counter spell for your 2-mana spell.
See Tomajko fetching to 15 off of Verdant Catacombs. I've spotted a Fulminator Mage in hand. That one's pretty inviting.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind going ahead and blowing up that Colonnade, restricting the white mana from Ingram, kind of forcing his hand on using a Field of Ruin early on to get access to white mana back. Unless, of course, he just draws a white mana source himself. But would also not be surprised to just see him not pop it and just start attacking for 2 and just force Pete to deal with it in some way at some point.
Yeah, Swamp is the find. Fulminator Mage Go is the play.
Like, it's always going to be able to blow up the Colonnade. And with Pete just saying draw go, land, you know, very little reason to blow the Fulminator Mage early on.
Ingram will play one of those Fields of Ruin as land number 3.
Here's an interesting play I just thought of. Oliver goes to his turn. Before casting Bloodbraid Elf. Ooh, okay. So here I actually thought there's a chance Oliver blows up Colonnade main phase. And that forces Ingram to fetch up white mana if he wants white mana, right? And then he could play Bloodbraid Elf, and if he hits a 2-drop, it can't be hit with Spell Snare. But Pete just kind of preempting that on the Raging Ravine, taking away the second red. Some of these Jund decks do play Seasoned Pyromancers, so perhaps a heads-up play from Ingram, since he doesn't know the list exactly.
So pre-combat, we're going to see Tomajko shock for a Bloodbraid Elf, and here comes Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, I think you just got to Spell Snare that.
So we know about a Spell Snare and a Dismember. He will use the Snare. But an attack for 5 comes across. Ingram to 15.
Yeah, but that's basically all he's got. So if Pete has a way to clean up these 2 creatures, Oliver just has a pair of lands in hand. His Raging Ravine is gone. The Bloodbraid Elf was the top end for this game, the payoff after those 2 discard spells, and Pete Ingram still got a grip full.
So he has picked up a Flooded Strand and some manner of Teferi. So the two of the cards we didn't know about. Tomajko still aware of a Dismember and a Field of Ruin. Ingram will play the Flooded Strand in his land.
So Pete can Time Raveler, bounce the Fulminator Mage, draw a card. Though Oliver actually can sacrifice it to prevent the card draw, I think. If it's worded that way. But Oliver chooses to keep the resource around, but that does give a draw to Pete. And now he can use the Dismember to kill the Bloodbraid Elf.
Yeah, so the -3 bounced the Fulminator. That worked. Ingram picked up a Stoneforge Mystic off the draw.
But Oliver did find a check for it with that Ancient Grudge, but that reactive card is not really what he wants in this spot. Something like Kolaghan's Command could be great because it deals with the equipment while getting back your Bloodbraid Elf, but the Ancient Grudge itself is not so good at the moment.
Tomajko points the Bloodbraid Elf at the Teferi. Ingram will fetch and dismember that. So he'll go to 10, but Teferi will stick around. And Fulminator Mage, recast, tapped Blackleaf Cliffs, and we'll go to Ingram.
Stoneforge Mystic here, in conjunction with the Teferi Time Raveler, could be a bit annoying. The timing is going to be off for Tomajko with that Ancient Grudge in order to stifle the value gained from the equipment.
Teferi to 2. Ingram's going to cast Stoneforge Mystic. Drum up an equipment here. It'll be Batterskull. No, there's still at least one land in hand. We've seen a Field of Ruin. He's going to play Flooded Strand instead, though.
I'm kind of curious to see if there's a block coming here from the Stoneforge Mystic. I'm thinking he's just going to let the Teferi die, because then he can start activating the Stoneforge Mystic to put in the Batterskull and still protect it with the bounce effect.
Well, not going to block with Stoneforge Mystic, I don't think, but he will cast a Snapcaster Mage to defend the Teferi.
Nice. Yeah, and he targets Spell Snare to protect from a 2-drop here. And he's going to offer the trade, Snapcaster for Fulminator Mage, and put Oliver to the test.
Right, Tomajko not interested in killing the Snapcaster Mage, would rather have the Colonnade, so he'll sacrifice. But no follow-up here, so Ingram will fetch the Flooded Strand at end step. Goes to 9.
Yeah, this is an EOT fetch, I'm pretty sure, because there's no way Oliver would just play the Tarmogoyf into the Spell Snare the Snapcaster Mage targeted, so.
Right. Ingram had selected a basic island, but now rethinking his decision.
May want to get Hallowed Fountain to give himself a second white source. He does have Supreme Verdict in his deck, 1 main, 1 board. So he may want that second white.
I suppose the argument for island is more Fulminator Mages.
All right, well now Pete gets to basically flash in a Batterskull next turn with a Teferi as protection, so not a whole lot can go wrong for him here. Shields are down for Oliver.
Teferi to 3. Snapcaster Mage knocks Tomajko to 11. Field of Ruin is land number 5 for Ingram.
Would honestly kind of love if Pete blew up the red source again to kind of stifle a potential Seasoned Pyromancer. We know it's not in the list, but it could always be a double red spell.
You see him passing and effects on draw step. Goes for Overgrown Tomb.
Okay.
So takes off double green.
Sure.
But Forest does replace it. He's seen the basic mountain.
Okay.
So I suppose you're just using the Field of Ruin.
That makes sense.
All right, now Tomajko under pretty tremendous pressure. The Time Raveler's back on 3, so another bounce is online if Ingram even needs it. That Stoneforge Mystic's going to put in a Batterskull. The Time Raveler protects that from any kind of instance as well.
Well, Tomajko has a Tarmogoyf and a Nurturing Peatland. He's going to go ahead and lead off here by cracking the Peatland to draw a card. Finds a second Tarmogoyf. Deploying both these this turn, not so bad.
Yeah, Tarmogoyf number 1 deployed. Tarmogoyf number 2 to join. So we've seen land, instant, sorcery, creature, I believe, to this point.
Yeah, no Planeswalker yet in the grave, no artifact or enchantment in the grave, and no tribal. As weird as that may sound.
Batterskull is going to show up end step. It's a little bit smaller than the Tarmogoyfs.
Yeah, Teferi can bounce one of the Tarmogoyfs, but it does grow the other one to a 5/6. But it does also let Pete see another card. What Pete can also do is just spend 5 mana, equip the Batterskull to the Snapcaster Mage and start chunking in for 6. But that's going to leave him vulnerable to Artifact Destruction spell from Tomajko.
I believe the hand for Ingram is Prismatic Vista Snapcaster Mage.
Snapcaster is a nice one.
He'll play Vista as the land for turn.
That is noticeably the 6th mana source, so he can go Snap Dismember plus bounce the Batterskull if he so chooses.
Teferi goes up to 4 and he'll pass. Back over to Tomajko. He's been sitting on that Ancient Grudge for a little while. At this point, though, the Batterskull can just be returned to Ingram's hand in response.
Yeah, and with the Teferi Time Raveler on the battlefield, he also just can't play it at instant speed. So as long as Ingram doesn't move to a main phase without 3 mana, his Batterskull should be relatively well protected here.
Running 6 is where Tomajko will start, nurturing Peatland, currently the top card of the graveyard. There's a Raging Ravine hanging out in the graveyard as well.
That is a good bait. But unfortunately for him, though, the bait is just a Spell Snare on Snapcaster Mage, and that leaves 3 mana up for the Germ token.
Puts a Planeswalker into the graveyard. The Ghosts are now 5/6.
Pete is at 9, but he can always block with the Germ token, gain the 4 life, and then bounce the Batterskull later.
You even get a double block with Germ Snapcaster Mage, and you just actually get to trade with Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, that's a nice. And also there's no a threat of a removal spell mid-combat to break that up because of the Time Raveler.
And this is where you're really seeing the power of Stoneforge Mystic. Tomajko has the Ancient Grudge in hand, right?
Yeah.
But the cards in the Stoneforge Mystic deck are putting Tomajko in kind of a squeeze.
Right, so Oliver here, if he wanted to, he could actually main phase Ancient Grudge on the Batterskull, force Ingram to bounce the Germ, or bounce the Batterskull, and then chunk in for 10 damage, and that would force at least 1 chump block from Pete and kind of maybe slow down his side of the battlefield and still leave Oliver with a potential flashback of Ancient Grudge. So I don't know if he has a good way out, but that might have been able to be the start of a way out.
So you saw no attacks and an end step fetch for Ingram down to 8.
Well, now Ingram has the ability to Time Raveler bounce either the Snapcaster Mage or the opposing Tarmogoyf. Or a Stoneforge Mystic.
There was the second Batterskull on the sideboard, so he could set up to get that one online. Yeah, bounces his own Stoneforge Mystic, picks that up, draws a card. I think the draw step for turn and off the Teferi were lands. Here's Stoneforge Mystic redeployed.
I'm curious if he's going to go get another Batterskull.
Could find Sword of Feast and Famine. There it is.
That's a nice one.
Hooks up the Germ. No threat of anything happening because of the Teferi.
Yeah, it also makes him discard a card. I believe he has a land to pitch still. But he's going to take 6. Ingram's going to gain 6. Untap all his lands. Force Oliver to discard. And now he still has access to bouncing the Batterskull in response to the Ancient Grudge.
And there's been some chip damage from various lands, that sort of thing. So Tomajko is going to 5 off of this.
Yeah, now he's basically forced to Ancient Grudge the Sword of Feast and Famine because it makes this creature virtually unblockable. But there's not a whole lot of ways out here for Tomajko now.
And another land was Tomajko's draw step, so it's Ancient Grudge land. Right, Ancient Grudge targeting Sword of Feast and Famine. That action's forced, though it does resolve.
Yeah, but you have to feel comfortable if you're in Pete's seat. Now with the Time Raveler, he can just start moving the Germ over if he wants to Snapcaster Mage or whatever, but okay. Or
Path to Exile on 1 Tarmogoyf, and the Alpha Strike does just end the game. So Peter Ingram, a quick 2-0